As fans of the sport, we've tried everything to break hockey down into a set of numbers and metrics that we can use to predict who will win any given game or series and who will not. But no matter how many metrics you use, the game today is just too unpredictable, more than it's ever been. We're now just over 3 weeks into the 2024 NHL playoffs, and in Game 1 of the second round between the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche, we all got a jarring reminder of just how unpredictable the playoffs can really be. After being down 3-0 in the first period, the Avalanche stormed back to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. McKinnon was dominant as usual, putting up a goal and an assist. Makar would control the entire game and lead his team with a goal and 2 assists. And Miles Wood would channel his inner Connor McDavid to put a dagger in the hearts of Stars fans. But why did this comeback feel inevitable? The Avalanche looked dead in the water at one point, going down 3-0 on the road against a fired-up crowd. And yet, you couldn't rest easy if you were a Stars fan knowing what the team on the other end was capable of. And in no universe should a number 8 seed Florida Panthers have beaten literally the greatest regular season team of all time in the Boston Bruins last year. But yet, it happened. Has the NHL, and specifically the playoffs, become more unpredictable than ever? In the past, there were always teams that breezed past the first round. But in today's NHL, all bets are off. Any team can seemingly win at any moment. But why is this? What has actually changed? Well, here's a normal win probability chart for any given game. The closer the line gets to the top or the bottom, the better the chances of that team winning become. This is normal. But Game 4 of the series between the Canucks and the Predators was not. The NHL is a volatile and unpredictable league, and there's a few reasons why. Is any lead safe in the NHL today? A 2-goal lead doesn't feel like nearly enough of a cushion, but what about a 3-goal lead? In today's NHL, as long as there's any time left on the clock, a 3-goal lead feels like it can be chipped away almost on a regular basis. The Avalanche overcoming a 3-goal lead against the Stars was remarkable. At the end of the first period, the Avs had just a 10% chance of making the comeback. The Canucks in Game 4 of their series against the Predators had just a 6% chance of making the comeback after they scored late in the third to cut the lead to 1. But you know what's even more remarkable? The very same Canucks pulled off an even more unlikely comeback just 10 days later in Game 1 of their series against the Oilers.
Lucy Rick wide, ducks her down low, scores! J.T. Miller! Got a man going to the net, but he curled back. Here's the shot, scores! Nikita Zadorov! Vancouver and Edmonton 2-3, and here comes Garland in, makes the shot, scores! Connor Garland! Draisaitl!
After falling behind 4-1 halfway through the game to the Oilers, the Canucks had just a 7% chance of coming back to win the game according to MoneyPuck's model. And those odds would decrease all the way down to less than 4% just over midway through the third. But within the next 5 minutes of game time, the odds of the Canucks winning this game would go from just under 4% all the way to almost 90%. Even when we look at playoff series instead of individual games, they're still completely unpredictable. In last year's first-round matchup between the Panthers and the Bruins were heavily favored by the betting markets. And for a while, those odds seemed right as the Bruins were up 3-1 in the series. They even had a chance to end the series in 5, with Brad Marchand getting a clear breakaway right at the end of regulation. But as we know now, the Panthers would end up completing one of the most famous comebacks to win the series in overtime of Game 7. The greatest regular season team in league history lost in a 7-game series to a number 8 seed who barely squeaked into the playoffs. It was yet another reminder of how volatile this league can be. A matchup between a number 1 seed and a number 8 seed is almost never a gimme. Here's a chart of the percentage of comeback wins in the playoffs since the start of the 2010s. In a typical year, around 30 to 40% of wins are comeback wins, meaning the team that eventually won the game trailed at one point. And this is where this year's playoffs sit so far, representing far and away the highest percentage in recent years. More than 50% of wins so far in the playoffs this year were come from behind wins. And a big part of this is the way teams are built today versus the early 2010s and even the 2000s. The league today is far more skilled offensively than it was in years prior. In the past, teams would typically stack their best offensive players on the top 2 lines. The third line would typically consist of defense-first checking forwards, and fourth lines were almost always comprised of energy players with limited offensive skills. This looks much different in today's game, where the bottom 6 often has several younger but skilled guys who can make a difference on the score sheet. Of the teams still in the playoffs, almost every one of them follows this trend, with guys like Will Cooley and Capo Caco on the Rangers, Niels Höglander on the Canucks, and Ryan McLeod and Dylan Holloway on the Oilers. And this infusion of younger, skilled players has helped raise scoring in 2 different ways. Not only are these guys better at scoring than the typical bottom 6 grinders of the past, but they're also usually worse at defending as well. Even on the blue line, guys like Erik Karlsson, Roman Josi, Cale Makar, and Quinn Hughes have revolutionized what it means to be an offensive defenseman in this league. I think Steve Yzerman put it perfectly when he said, "Teams are having trouble defending." When we played, it was pretty simple. 3-on-3 down low, and the wingers covered the points. But now, these defensemen are so active, which results in a lot more switches and movement, which creates confusion when the offensive team breaks the puck out of the corners. This new style of roster construction with more skilled bottom 6 players and a more skilled blue line are a perfect storm for allowing more comebacks to happen. With lineups being tilted towards offense, you always have hope that your team can close any deficit, no matter how large it seems. And when you have the lead, those same offensive players typically don't check as well as the old school grinders may have. And when you look at stats, they back this up, as scoring is the highest it's been in decades. And to add to this, power plays are as potent as they've been in years as well, with teams like the Oilers operating at nearly 40% halfway through the playoffs. And almost every comeback win in these playoffs so far has had a power play goal by the team making the comeback. And as unfortunate as this is, some of this is because of the game management that occurs in the NHL, where teams that are trailing or have fewer power play opportunities through the game are more likely to get more power play opportunities the rest of the game. This has been the topic of discussion for years, but this analysis by MoneyPuck really helped add some merit to those discussions. This graph shows that as the share of penalties on the away team increases, the likelihood that the next penalty is on the home team increases as well, as the referees try to even up the game. And if you look at the penalties taken and drawn for each team this season, there's a very clear correlation between the amount of penalty minutes taken by a team and the amount of penalty minutes drawn by the same team. And this game management by NHL refs was given even more attention when this audio clip of former NHL referee Tim Peel was released.
It wasn't much, but I wanted to get a fucking penalty against Nashville early in the...
By all accounts, a veteran NHL ref openly admitting to wanting to call a penalty on a specific team was a terrible look for the league. Tim Peel was rightfully removed from reffing games after this incident, but it's hard not to believe that this wasn't a one-off, but rather an indication of the systemic problem that exists with refereeing in the NHL, where it seems that the main objective is not to call the games correctly, but rather to call the games equally. And that's a foundational failure in my opinion. This tendency to manage games, coupled with the most efficient power plays in recent years, has been a key element fueling the increased comebacks in the last few years. And lastly, hockey is the most luck-dependent sport out of the major North American sports. And before some of you get your pitchforks out, I'm not saying by any means that hockey players are the least skilled out of the major North American sports. I think the opposite, in fact. But this is an indicator of how well each sport measures the skill of its players and teams. And Michael Mauboussin, who wrote the book that tries to rank these sports by the relative contributions of skill and luck, explains this perfectly.
Basketball, they're coming down and they have a shot clock and they have to take lots of shots.
Four to shoot, finds a little room, fires, and hits a three.
They're forced to take shots, so there's a lot of samples. They go back and forth. Ice hockey, of course, it's much more fluid. The possessions are much less discrete.
I'm going to link the whole video made by Vox in the description below, as I think it's an excellent breakdown of what makes hockey more random than any other major sport. But at the end of the day, a more luck-dependent sport is going to result in more upsets and more unpredictable outcomes. It's in the very nature of the sport, and it's frankly what makes hockey one of the most exciting sports to watch, in my opinion. You truly don't know what could happen in any given game or even in a 7-game series. And with the game being the fastest and most skilled it's ever been, it's been a great time to be a fan, despite the refs being the bane of every fan's existence. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you choose to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more of this kind of content. I've also linked my Patreon in the description for those who would like to support the channel even further. Thanks for watching.